So I'm going to talk to you today about collaboration. I wrote a book recently called Mastering Collaboration for O'Reilly because I was actually at PG&E, which is our local energy utility. We've just set some fires, I think, again. It's a good place to get out of. I left there about 2 years ago, and I've started my own practice as a product management, product design consultant. And I'm a designer by background, an interaction designer by background. And so I really saw very well-intentioned people screw it up. So my favorite executive at PG&E wanted to pull off a reorg, and she had a big meeting, and she said all the right things about how we were going to collaborate, and she really wanted our input, and here's the problem, very thoughtfully framed. And then in the last 5 minutes of the meeting, she's like, so here's my new org chart, what do you think? And I was like, ugh, we could have done this so differently. I could have saved you from yourself. Because probably a lot of you have had that experience of like the whiplash or the fake collaboration. Also, some of you may have been on really dysfunctional teams. Has anyone been on a team that like just can't get along? Yeah, it happens. And if you are a product manager in that situation, people are going to look to you to help rectify that. Even if you're the problem, right? Everyone's like, no, that person's the problem, that person's the problem. You're in a good spot. And so I think that our relationship with collaboration is, I jokingly say, like Facebook status, it's complicated. Like, yeah, executives talk about it like it's important. There's a lot of written in praise of collaboration on Harvard Business Review, but there wasn't a lot out there about how to do it. So I thought I would try to frame that up. And I started by, this was a model given to me by a woman named Kate Rudder, to say, well, what do you mean by collaboration? Because like everything's collaboration on some level. And I think that's actually what makes people push back against it, because they think it's like going to happen all the time. And we'll get into that. It's not true. But on the one hand, you might have work that's cooperative. So if we're going to build a fence, you're going to dig some holes, you're going to put some posts, you're going to do some slats. Yeah, you all are doing different things, but the work is pretty, we know it's not mysterious. We know how to sequence it. We know what it is. On the other end, you have this like, okay, two people in a room wrestling over like, what should this button do? Or what is the flow here? Or, you know, that really deep collaboration, the really deep co-creation rather. In the middle, you have collaboration, which is that really close team surrounded by their stakeholders, who are probably executives who are on the hook for what the team does. So somebody was asking earlier, what is a product manager? And the answer I think you gave was very thoughtful. It's like, kind of depends on where you are. But my least favorite description of product management is the CEO of the product. Don't say that, unless you're the CEO of the company, because the CEO is going to be like, fuck, you're not. These people their jobs are going to be on the line, maybe even more than yours if it doesn't go well. You also have people you need to bring in, subject matter experts. Okay, we're going to a new country. We got to get some people from there. We're going into a new area. We need some more subject matter experts. And then you have people who are onlookers. And I noticed at PG&E, I raised this because if you just focus here, I noticed people would sit up here and then throw darts and be like, can I get her off her foot? Can I wrong foot her? Can I screw them up? So you got to think about how you're going to pull them in. And collaboration is good for things that are complicated, right? So not building fences, but climate change, fake news, things that we don't necessarily know the cause and effect of. It's good when there's a lot of ambiguity. Hey, I think we'd like to go there. I have no idea how to get there. I have a client that's in this situation right now. It's very clear where they need to go. There's no, like, we're all like, where's the path start? It's good for getting alignment. Obviously, everyone's on the same page. And then getting employees engaged. So sometimes, and companies spend a lot of money on surveying how engaged are my employees. So they'll value getting them more engaged. But it's hard. A lot of you raised your hands. You've had bad experiences. I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. But in my research, what I found is our corporate environments really favor individualism, right? You're all reviewed independently. You kind of compete for opportunities. It's not, the framework is not there to be a collective, no matter how many times the CEO says we're going to be more collaborative, or your boss is like, we're going to work in teams. Yes, you can say that. It's still, the ecosystem is about individuals. We often get very unclear objectives. I'll talk a lot more about this, but I interviewed Michael Sippy, who is the head of product at Medium. And he was like, oh, my best advice is like, you got to have really clear objectives. And I was like, awesome, Michael, like, what do you do to get clear objectives? And he's like, well, probably not enough. So this is something that, again, we say we need, but we don't do a good job of defining. We sort of get right into the work. Like, oh, we know what we're doing. We'll get the objectives later. We'll know it when we see it. We love experts. And we love experts because they're experts, but also they let us off the hook. Well, the expert said that. That wasn't me, man. That was the expert, right? It's a good eject lever. And then finally, really bad communication, a la that executive I was just telling you about. So if you flip that around, there are things you can do about your environment. And I'm going to talk to you about a couple of specifics in each of these buckets today. There are things you can do about your environment. There are things you can do about setting a vision. There are things you can do about getting to good solutions. And again, as a product designer, I'm not going to speak too much about this tonight, but design thinking type things where you're not just assuming you know an answer and running after it. You're exploring widely, testing and learning. And then finally, communication. Today, I'm going to talk about these things and give you some specifics. And I'll leave a lot of room for Q&A because I find everybody's, what's the Anna Karenina? Every happy family is the same and every unhappy family is unhappy in their own way. I find everyone's collaboration challenges are unique to them and yet very similar. So I'm going to first talk about enabling trust. Have any of you seen the movie Meru or Free Solo? You've seen that? So Jimmy Chin is a filmmaker, photographer, and he made the movie Free Solo, which is when Alex Honnold climbed 3,000 feet of granite wall in Yosemite with no ropes. I know Jimmy. I interviewed him for this book, and he puts his life in his teammates' hands constantly, like literally. The movie Meru is actually like a whole bunch of life and death things where he nearly dies a number of times. So I asked him, let's talk about what makes trust. And he can handpick his team, right? There's only 10 people in the world that could have made Free Solo, and he picked 5 of them. We can't necessarily do that in corporate America. At least I've never been able to fully do that. So what his advice is to think about how do you take little bits of trust that already exist, 2 people who've had a good experience together. Maybe you want to put them together on a team. Because then they start to see that whole team and model for that team what it looks like to trust one another. Because you can't really just be like, trust me, trust her. It doesn't work that way. And you can, if you get a high-performing team, I always hate when they're like, that's our high-performing team, we're just going to keep them over there. Crank out the stuff. And you're like, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you chop it up and send those little seeds out into other teams to get them healthier? And I say, always do this in increments of 2, at least. Don't send 1 person out or 3 people out. Well, I guess you could do 3 people, but 1 person is going to not do it. And the only way you get trust is by doing things together. And so my suggestion here is if you have a new team, pick a very low risk, maybe even not product related thing to do together. We're all going to practice using this new tool. Or we're all going to make a prototype of some totally weird, stupid thing that came up in the hackathon so that you have that experience together. When she says she's full stack, she's really only 3/4. And that's cool because now we know we'll get this other quarter here, right? When this person only works after 11 a.m. till 9 p.m. and this person's coming in at 6 a.m., good to know. Let's deal with that. And then in my house, I am not the cook, and my first pancake is always terribly ugly. It's edible, but it's first pancake. And so this low effort thing is about saying your pancake doesn't have to be beautiful and perfect. It's totally fine. It's your first pancake. It's going to set you up for some gorgeous 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th pancakes. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is the idea of space. This actually gets me the most questions, which I thought I almost didn't write about this for the book, and so many people were asking me about it, and I'm like, okay. So literally physical space is how I went into this. And I went in with the bias that, of course, in-person synchronous communication is the bomb. Come back to that. So the first thing is collaboration is not 24/7. It is unfair. I hate this new open office thing where they shove all the pods together and then you're all supposed to just collaborate all the time. That's actually what drives people crazy. what you need is a dedicated space where you could go be, well, ideally you have a place you can go be all together and a place you do your work. And maybe that is an ideological space. Like, yes, if we sit this far, but we say from noon to 3, don't talk to anyone, right? When I was at Cooper, which is a design firm I worked for, we would pair design, just like pair programming. And we would from 9 to 11, we would work together. We'd go to lunch, or 9 to 12, go to lunch, and then in the afternoon we'd break off. Other teams did that different. But make sure you're allowing time to actually do the work you all talked about. So I said, wow, of course, like being at the whiteboard in front of everybody in real time is the right way to communicate. And then I started to realize maybe that's not true. I talked to enough people who are on all remote teams. I talked to people who work at Automatic, right? The WordPress situations, completely InVision, totally distributed teams. And the thing that came out, because obviously collaboration, I skipped this part, but why would we collaborate?
Bring ideas together.
Yeah, ideas together and skills you don't have, perspectives you don't have. Does anybody remember Lady Doritos? For like a hot second, Doritos had done some very thoughtful research and found out that women did not want to eat Doritos in public because they were crunchy and they would lick the delicious powder off their fingers, all of which is like not ladylike. And so these probably product people came up with a solution. We will make Doritos that are less crunchy and have less flavor powder. Sounds fucking terrible. I want no part of that, right? That was a team full of product people solving a problem, which is called patriarchy. That's not going to happen, right? A more effective solution is run a marketing campaign a la, you guys are probably too young, but like, was it Carl's Jr. or somebody would be like, show women lustily licking powder off of their fingers and like your job's done and it's cheaper. So we're looking for that diversity. So what happens when you have the whiteboard-a-thon is you filter out all that diversity. So people who are not native speakers of the dominant language are at a disadvantage. I can run a room. You stand me at a whiteboard with a pen, I can get you anywhere I want to because I'm really good at that. Well, that means I shut down all the other people in the room who couldn't stand up to me, right? Or you get the authoritative person in the room, even worse. Now nobody is going to listen. They're all nodding and saying, yep, whatever he says is fine. Asynchronous communication. So whether you're co-located or not, how do you come up with asynchronous communication? So at Google, at Amazon, there's this white paper approach. Have you folks heard of this? My husband works at Google Maps, and so they literally will write down in a 3-page paper, 3 to 5 page paper, here's what we're trying to do, here's our argument, here's our hypothesis, and everybody can beat up on that Google Doc with all their comments. And then when they come together, either in person or remote, they prioritize that time to make decisions. So everybody's had, I used to have a guy that worked for me and we would have a meeting and he'd say, I got it. And then in the morning I'd have like a huge email of all the stuff he did not tell me. So when you have asynchronous communication, everybody gets to have their say. And then you have a better outcome. So whether you are remote or not, don't fret. Focus on how do you make asynchronous communication happen. So if you have a demo day or a sprint review, right? Like that's the killer. Everybody wants to be in that room. You got people in China or Australia, like make a movie. Send them a video and let them ask questions, right? So think about supporting that so that everybody gets heard. There is something about when you do have the giant brainstorm, and I think if I asked people, like, send me a stock photo of collaboration, you'd send me, like, a brainstorming meeting photo, because I think that's what most people think it is, mostly. And it's true when you are in that space, if you have, if you can be like, oh, this is our criteria for success over here, and here's, like, the ideas about the login flow or whatever it is, you can use that space really well. There's also Mural is a virtual whiteboard product that I've been using, which is quite useful for this as well. So yeah, here's the real one, and then here's the Mural board. So you can see you're doing the same thing. You can label and cluster and make everything visible. And this is important because you want people to feel heard. And when you put what they say up on the board, then they know it got heard. Now, I've also been in a situation where people are worried if someone says X, that means we have to do X. That's not how this works. Like, I've never been in a brainstorm where the idea came out fully formed. It's all just informing your intuition and getting on the same page. So don't be afraid to write stuff down and make it visible. Next, we'll talk about giving everyone a role. So I had that diagram earlier here of like these different kinds of roles. And there are roles in here. And I talk about it as navigators and drivers. And this comes from my pair design situation, which is if the navigator is saying, okay, here's what we're trying to get. Our goal for this sprint is, this is often a product management role. Our goal for this sprint is address the funnel dropout that we found through analytics. And here's our use cases we're going to go after. And here's what's going to make it better or worse. They're keeping track of what are we doing and what is success going to look like. The drivers are then going to go around and say, well, what if we did it like this? What if we did it like that? What if we did it like this? What if we did it like that? And generate all those ideas that you can go test and learn on. And that helps people from, yeah, but I already tried that. Or I picked an idea and I just chased it. You have someone who says, yeah, but we're not working on that right now. Come back in, come back over here. So thinking about giving people different roles, and I go into this more in the book. I also wrote a free pair design book from O'Reilly if you want to try to find that. It has more detail. And then for the stakeholders we talked about, have any of you used a RACI or a DACI framework? I did not invent this. This is a, you have the decider or the responsible is the RACI if it's not DACI. And that is, that's going to be the stakeholder whose neck is on the line, who's got to make the decisions. You've got your advisors, or sometimes they're called accountable, but I call them advisors. And the way I like to do this is these are the people who are going to be able to veto. If this person is really going nuts, they might be able to say, I don't think that's right. They have some authority to challenge. Everyone loves to argue about being in one of these two roles. These are kind of the more important ones. Like this is who's actually doing the work. These are the people closest to the work. And these are people who often get left out, who you need to make sure you communicate to. Again, there's a ton written about that on the internet as well. Then we get to these objectives I was mentioning. And so I have this shot of the emergency room here because one of the people I spoke to was an ER doctor, and I was super excited to hear all the dirty laundry that happens in the emergency room. And I was like, so what kind of fights happen? And he was like, we don't have time for that. That's a non-starter. You have a patient on the table whose life is in jeopardy. That is a very unifying thing. And that really was a light bulb for me. Because we all have urgency in what we're trying to do, meaning I would like it done tomorrow. That is different than what happens if we fail. So you're going to have to define this for yourself. Very rarely is somebody going to give you, the people who sit around and do your annual strategic planning are not building this into their objectives, right? So you can do this though. And my prompt is, what if you did nothing? Because when it breaks down, when the collaboration breaks, it's not like you make a nuclear bomb and it goes off in the middle of downtown. It's like you just go back to your little silos and corners and nothing happens. So what if you do nothing? Why are we doing this? Outcomes over outputs. Have you guys heard this phrase? This is like the new religion, I feel like. So an outcome is, so I have a client that makes products for diabetics. I do a lot of medical stuff. The outcome is get people to better A1Cs, better measurements of their diabetes, right? Improve their diabetes. The output might be, here's our next product release. But that is not enough. We shipped it, doesn't mean anything. Because what if you ship it and you do worse? More people have diabetes or don't manage their diabetes. And then they start going blind and going numb, losing feet. So again, you often get given this. Build a this by then. You might have to back yourself up to what does the world look like when we do it? Not the specific thing, but what does the world look like when we back up to that? So executives are totally famous for like, make me a hexagonal blue thing that's 6 feet long. And like, if you've been at this a minute, you go, okay, why? Can we back up? Because what if it's not that thing that solves the problem? And a lot of executives, people get really nervous. They're like, the CEO told me to do that. I talked to enough of those CEOs who are like, I didn't mean literally that. I was just like, I meant like that thing. They're expecting you to extrapolate out to those objectives. So think about that. There's a great story by a man named Tom Chi, who was one of the first employees at Google X, and he was working on the Google Glass first prototype. And he shows up at his first day, and he's like working with like heroes in the industry, one of whom is Sergey Brin, is on the team, and he's like, this is going to be amazing. And he'd previously been at Yahoo and was like, oh, that was kind of a mess. So they start their first day, and at one point they start to get into kind of a food fight about what color the heads-up display should be. And it's going on for like an hour, and now Tom's starting to be like, wait a minute, is this really, this feels very familiar. We're just going to like lob opinions about this? And then Sergey says, here's the deal. It's going to be red, because red photons take the lowest amount of energy, and in science fiction, it's always red. And everyone's like, oh, sweet, done, ship it. And Tom was like, wait, what if we all just break up right now? You make a green one, you make a blue one, you make a yellow one, and we all just try this out before we decide. So that's what they did. And they came back at the end of that first day, so 4 hours later, with their prototypes, and guess which one was the worst color? Red. Because red photons are the lowest energy, do take the lowest energy, which means they are totally overwritten by everything else in your visual field. You can't see it. So Sergey Brin was wrong for the right reason. And this happens all the time. He calls it a guess-a-thon, right? Executives are like, I think we need to do this. Hear the I think before that. And as a product manager, reserve the right for yourself to say, I think what you're trying to achieve with that thing is this. So we also tried 4 other things, and guess what works best? Don't tell him his idea is wrong, her idea is wrong. Show up with the data and give yourself permission to back up to things that are actionable. So increase engagement by 2% is like my least favorite KPI. It's like totally fucking useless. It's not actionable. Yes, it is a metric that we should manage. It doesn't tell you where to go. So if you can think about what is actionable, what is behind that assumption about engagement, what do we know that drives engagement already or doesn't? Let's skip that one. And then finally, I'm going to talk a little bit about storytelling. Every time I teach this workshop or do this talk, people are like, I already know about storytelling. And it's true you do as a consumer of stories. You probably are not using your skills at work, or you would not be having some of the challenges you're having. So when I find myself in this like, oh, I've said this a million times. Why does this person not get it? What are they, dumb? That's my prompt to like, okay, I have not done my job here. I've not brought them along. Because we are hardwired for stories. Literally our brains, there's a Kendall Haven at Stanford stuck people in fMRI machines and like found the storytelling network in our brains. If you don't give people a story, they will make one up. They will leave out information. They will make up information. They will completely, because it doesn't make sense to them. And if it doesn't make sense and doesn't follow this idea of there's a beginning, middle, and an end, it's not going to work. And so what oftentimes, you've been in these presentations, people show up with data, or they show up with like this little thing. I've been working on this thing, and they're talking about this little thing. You have to remember that stakeholder, when's the last time you talked to them? It might be months, might be weeks. Even if it's days, they don't remember the last thing you said to them. So you have to do what I call previously on Lost, right? So they have it now in front of all the TV shows, right? Previously, and they show you highlights. It's a great tool for you. And if you notice, they do it in kind of a revisionist history way, right? Like they bring back a character from like 3 seasons ago into the prologue, and oh, that person's coming back. So you can choose what you want to emphasize from previous times, but you should do that. If you just launch them into your little box, they don't know where they are, they don't know what you want from them, and they're probably just going to get irritated and start shitting all over it. So speaking of shit, the number one thing you leave out of all your stories is the oh shit moment. And so as a user-centered designer, I have definitely been guilty of this. Here's Janie. She wakes up, she goes to work, and she uses our product, and she has a great time, and it's all wonderful. Like literally nothing happened in that story. So you've got to, what does your product help her get over? Might be one oh shit moment. Or what random unexpected thing does she have to deal with? It's not just the happy path, there's the unhappy path. Those are all moments that get people really engaged. And, oh, what's going to happen? Is our product going to make it? So user scenarios about your product are one way to do this. Another form of storytelling, though, might be the story of the team. So our team has really been struggling with X, Y, and Z. You could frame it as that. Or the brand. Our brand is really on this journey, and here's where we're going. But make it more than just the artifacts and the data. The data is important. The artifacts are important, but you've got to put them in a wrapper. And I know it sounds like a lot of work. I think it's actually less work because you end up not having to dig yourself out later. They don't just happen. So I mentioned Jimmy Chin in that other movie, Meru, the one with life and death. The other reason I wanted to talk to him is he makes documentary films with his wife. And when they first met, he showed her his first rough cut. It was, he had like an hour and a half worth of a movie. And this is a story where literally people are like near death. It's a crazy, wonderful story. But his, girlfriend at the time was like, this is dudes climbing. There is no story here. There's no emotional appeal. And so what they've really come to, and they're working together, is he's the cinematographer and she's the director, and she brings that storytelling and he brings the visuals, and they're very clear about their different roles and their different responsibilities. And now Jimmy is very clear that somebody has to make the story happen. So my advice is give someone the job. It often could be a product manager, but it doesn't have to be because you might be too close to it. If you have someone who's taking notes for what did we argue about, like what's the story behind how that decision got made, like whatever it is you're looking for the buy-in on, have somebody keep that story going for that thing. And it doesn't have to be elaborate, right? Just keeping some notes because you forget, right? Or it's last minute and your sprint review's coming up. That's not the time to write the story. You won't do it. So, that being said, we have ways to push back. I always say there's a lot of like digital transformation initiatives going on right now. Do you guys know what I mean? You know what that means? Like if you work like at PG&E. PG&E is like, we're a 110-year-old company that runs on paper. We got to transform ourselves. And that's coming from the top down. They've been at that a while, and it's going to take them a while. My advice is don't try to change the entire organization unless maybe you work in an organization of like 4 people, which hopefully you don't have these intractable problems. But you want to really think about how do you create a little bubble of literal, metaphorical space that is different than the operating system of the capitalist machine, where you guys can do your thing and then re-enter the machine when you have to, yeah? Don't make it, you're not going to change the world. This is not Braveheart. You're not Mel Gibson. You're not going to win in one go. And we do want to collaborate because we know that complex and ambiguous problems need a lot of different perspectives. And by including people in the work, they're more engaged and more aligned.